Imagine firing a $2 million state-of-the-art missile to shoot down a homemade drone that costs, I mean, less than a used laptop.
Yep, that math does not work out.
Right. You won the battle, but economically, you are just bleeding to death. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today's mission is to unpack an incredibly detailed financial presentation deck, exploring the really explosive intersection of defense technology and investment.
It's a fascinating space right now.
It really is. And for you listening, we're looking at a core tension reshaping global security. Militaries are basically going broke shooting down these cheap drones. But there's this sci-fi sounding economic solution that is about to change the defense industry forever.
Absolutely.
And to help you separate the hype from the actual financial triggers, I'm joined by our expert guide, who's going to help us look past the flashy lasers and focus on the numbers that actually matter to investors.
Glad to be here. Let's get right into it. Because while the technology sounds like it's straight out of a movie, I mean, the investment implications are very real and very immediate. We're breaking down how this shift disrupts defense budgets and, creates entirely new winners and losers in the market.
Which brings us right to our first major concept. So let's look at slide 1. Directed energy weapons, the cost per shot revolution. We're looking at a paradigm shift that's basically on par with the invention of precision-guided munitions.
It really is that massive of a leap.
Right. To put this in perspective for you, using our current kinetic defense systems against today's threats, it's like trying to kill a $2 mosquito with a multi-million-dollar fly swatter.
That is a perfect analogy.
I mean, you might squash the mosquito, sure, but you'll bankrupt yourself doing it.
Exactly. And that cost asymmetry is the absolute bedrock of the financial thesis we're exploring today. We aren't just talking about cool, futuristic technology here.
Right.
We're facing a devastating crisis caused by weaponized drones. The economic foundation of how we defend ourselves is fundamentally broken, and, directed energy weapons, or DUW, they're emerging as the only viable economic answer for investors who are tracking these defense budgets.
But you don't even have to look to the future to see why this is unsustainable. Which brings into focus the data on slide 2. The crisis that created the opportunity.
Yeah, the numbers here are stark.
The math is terrifying. You're trading a $2 million interceptor missile for a $2,000 off-the-shelf commercial drone. But I have to push back a little here.
Sure.
Is this just a theoretical worst-case scenario drawn up in some Pentagon war room, or is this actually happening right now?
Oh, it's happening right now. The source material specifically highlights the Houthi forces in the Middle East to prove this is an immediate present-day crisis.
Wow.
Yeah. State actors and non-state groups, they're deploying cheap, mass-produced drones far faster than traditional kinetic missile stockpiles can possibly be replenished.
So it's just a numbers game.
Exactly. You're facing a 1,000-to-1 cost asymmetry ratio. You mean, no military budget on Earth can win a math war when every successful defense costs you $2 million and the enemy only pays $2,000.
Okay, let's unpack this because the solution is fascinating. The deck outlines 3 pillars in slide 3. The strategic thesis, why do matters right now.
Right, the 3 core advantages.
Yeah. We've got an infinite magazine, a radical cost per shot, and speed of light engagement. But how does an infinite magazine actually work in the real world? Because you always run out of bullets eventually, right?
Well, in traditional warfare, yes, absolutely. But with directed energy, as long as you have electricity, you have ammo.
That is wild.
It changes everything. There are no physical missiles to transport, load, or replenish out in the field.
Yeah.
But the real financial mic drop for investors, though, is that cost per shot.
How cheap are we talking?
We're talking about dropping the cost of a single laser engagement from millions of dollars down to roughly $1 to $10.
Just a few dollars.
Yep, just the cost of the diesel fuel to run the generator. That transforms the economics of air defense from a guaranteed financial loss into a really decisive advantage.
Okay, so if I'm picturing the different technologies outlined in slide 4, what are directed energy weapons? It breaks down high-energy lasers, or HEL, and high-power microwaves, or HPM.
Right, those are the 2 main families.
So high-energy lasers operate like a precision sniper rifle, right? Using intense heat to melt a specific target. And then the high-power microwaves operate more like a wide-area EMP shotgun blast that just fries the electronics of everything in front of it.
Exactly, and what's fascinating here is how those distinct profiles dictate the defense contracts.
How so?
Well, you need HPMs, like RTX's Chimera system, because a single broad pulse can neutralize an entire coordinated drone swarm at once without aiming at each individual threat.
Oh, that makes sense for swarms.
Right. Meanwhile, the high-energy lasers from companies like Lockheed and Northrop, those are essential for high-accuracy, line-of-sight strikes against larger, faster targets, like incoming missiles. A modern defense grid absolutely requires both to survive.
Okay, understanding the tech is one thing, but timing the market is another entirely, which is mapped out perfectly on slide 5. The investment landscape, from science fiction to line item procurement.
This slide is crucial for timing.
Yeah, it walks us through a 4-stage timeline from 2010 all the way out to 2030. So we started in the laboratory era, then prototype deployment. But looking closely, we are currently sitting right on the inflection point between Phase 3, battlefield validation, and Phase 4, mass procurement.
And that inflection point is exactly why this matters to you financially right now.
Because the money is moving.
Exactly. We're moving out of the experimental R&D phase and into formal, baked-in defense budgets. The next 24 months are critical because they'll dictate which of these prototypes turn into massive, multi-billion-dollar production contracts.
Right.
For an investor, catching a defense contractor right as they transition from testing into mass procurement, well, that's where the significant value gets created.
So let's quantify who's actually leading the pack. We can see that on slide 6. Dimensional scoring key player analysis. The deck scores the major players across this proprietary framework.
Right, they rank them all.
Yeah. We see RTX at the top with an 85, Lockheed at 82, Northrop Grumman at 75, and then way down at 58 is a speculative company called Enlight. But wait, Enlight is a pure laser company. Shouldn't a laser specialist score higher than traditional defense contractors on a laser weapon?
You would think so, but it comes down to systems integration. The high scores go to the prime integrators, the RTXs and Lockheeds of the world.
Because they build the whole package.
Exactly. The military doesn't just want to buy a raw laser beam. They need a company that can build the whole integrated system. You need the targeting radar, the command and control software, the power management, and, the physical platform it actually mounts on.
So Enlight just makes the laser part.
Right. The primes can do all that integration, whereas Enlight only provides the specific laser component.
That reliance on integration is really highlighted in slide 7. Deep dive the prime integrators. These are what the deck calls your safe harbor investments.
The big established players.
Yeah. RTX is pivoting aggressively to high-power microwaves, while Lockheed is getting their Helios system integrated onto Navy warships. And then there's Northrop Grumman, who specializes in beam combining, which, reading this, it sounds like taking several standard garden hoses and combining them into one massive high-pressure fire hose to dramatically increase the stopping power.
That's a great way to visualize it. Beam combining is a critical technical hurdle for scaling up weapon power.
Right.
But the larger takeaway for these prime integrators is their enormous competitive moat. Because they build the radar, the tracking algorithms, and the cooling systems alongside the laser, they basically lock in the contract.
So no one can really steal their lunch.
Not easily.
Right.
A competitor can't just build a slightly better laser and take their business. They'd have to replicate decades of classified systems integration experience.
But what if you do want to take a swing at the pure tech? Let's flip to slide 8. Deep dive the pure play disruptors. This focuses on Enlight, ticker symbol LASR.
Right, the speculative play.
Yeah, they have a high-risk, high-reward profile. And here's where it gets really interesting. The bull case is that Enlight becomes the intel inside of all laser weapons. Like, if every major system deployed by the primes contains Enlight components, they just sit back and collect on the entire sector's growth.
That's the dream scenario, yes. But we need a bearish reality check here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Enlight currently operates with a negative 9% net margin, meaning they're actively losing money on their operations.
Yikes.
But furthermore, their revenue is entirely at the mercy of government R&D contract cycles, which are notoriously volatile. I mean, a single budget delay in Washington can just crush their quarterly results.
So proceed with caution.
Absolutely. The source material gives a very strict warning to keep this specific exposure to under 2% of your portfolio.
Good to know. Well, let's look at those financial metrics closer on slide 9. Financial comparison by the numbers. We're looking at market caps, PE ratios, and net margins.
The fundamental data.
Right. RTX is obviously the giant in the room at over $240 billion. But playing the role of the skeptical investor here, while RTX is massive, it looks to me like Northrop Grumman actually has the most attractive valuation on the board.
You're spot on. Northrop Grumman is definitely the standout value play in this group.
Because of the PE ratio.
Exactly. They offer an 18.2x PE ratio. So in plain English, you're paying significantly less for every dollar of their profit compared to RTX, which trades at a much higher 33x multiple.
Oh, wow. That is a big difference.
It is. And what makes Northrop special is they combine that affordability with the highest net margin in the entire cohort at 10.8%, which offers a genuine margin of safety for investors.
So what triggers these stocks to actually move and realize that value? That's covered in slide 10. Catalyst, #1 the laser dome doctrine.
This is a massive shift in strategy.
Yeah, this outlines the Pentagon's shift toward an integrated, layered, directed energy shield for critical infrastructure. Just imagine for a second entire cities, power grids, or naval bases shielded by invisible domes of energy, instantly neutralizing incoming threats. It really bridges the gap between science fiction and reality.
It does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, moving toward a laser dome architecture means the Department of Defense is abandoning those one-off test contracts.
So they're buying in bulk now.
Yes, they're moving toward multi-decade programs of record. You aren't just buying a single laser for a single ship anymore. You're architecting a national defense grid.
That's huge.
It is. That turns millions in experimental revenue into billions in recurring procurement revenue for these contractors. It provides that long-term visibility that investors absolutely love.
Which brings up an interesting wrinkle in slide 11. Catalyst, #2 AeroVironment enters the arena. AeroVironment, which is mostly known for drones, they just demonstrated their ALOCUST laser system on a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier.
Which was a very successful test.
But wait, if smaller, agile companies are suddenly entering the space and succeeding, doesn't that ruin the monopoly and hurt those prime integrators we were just praising?
You'd think so, but it actually validates the entire market.
How so?
Well, it proves to the DoD that the technology is mature enough that non-traditional suppliers can build it. But more importantly, it turns these smaller innovators into highly attractive M&A merger and acquisition targets.
Ah, so the big guys just buy them up.
Precisely. The big primes are sitting on mountains of cash, and acquiring these smaller players is far cheaper and faster than funding internal R&D from scratch. They absorb the technology and the talent, which just further consolidates their own power.
Okay, that makes sense. And that real-world proof leads right to slide 12. Catalyst, #3 real-world combat deployment. This details the deployment of Army Stryker vehicles equipped with lasers right into the Middle East.
Getting it out of the lab.
Yeah, because as anyone knows, lab tests and controlled environments, those are easy. But the desert is brutal. You're dealing with blinding dust, extreme heat, and totally unpredictable enemy tactics.
Exactly. And the military isn't going to buy thousands of these systems based on a slick PowerPoint presentation.
Obviously not.
They need live operational data against actual Houthi drones in combat conditions. Once these Stryker-mounted lasers prove they can survive and perform in that brutal desert environment, it acts as the ultimate gold standard.
It proves it actually works when it matters.
Right. That operational success is the key to unlocking mass procurement across the entire military vehicle fleet.
But getting to that point is incredibly hard, as we can see on slide 13. The technical moat why new entrants struggle. The engineering hurdles here are just massive. You've got beam quality, system integration, and especially thermal management.
Thermal management is the silent killer for these systems.
Yeah, basically you're trying to cool down a mini power plant strapped to the roof of a moving truck without the whole thing melting down.
It's a huge challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's vital for investors to understand that this isn't a software problem you can just code your way out of in Silicon Valley.
You can't just patch it.
No, it's a deeply integrated physical engineering discipline. Managing megawatt-level power and dissipating that enormous heat requires decades of specialized material science. This sheer physical complexity is the ultimate technical moat, and it keeps those flashy startups completely locked out of the lucrative contracts.
Given all that, let's look at slide 14, trend versus trade analysis. The presentation confirms a 90% bullish confidence level on the sector.
Very high confidence.
But I have to wonder, is this just a passing defense fad? I mean, budgets change, administrations change. Could this whole directed energy push just disappear after the next election cycle?
The short answer is no. The threat of commodity-priced drones is structural and permanent. It really doesn't matter who is in office.
Because the drones aren't going away.
Exactly. Every adversary now has access to weaponized drones. Therefore, directed energy defense is mandatory, regardless of political budget battles in Washington.
So what's the play?
The trade signal here is clear. You accumulate the prime integrators now, and if you want the best value, wait for a slight pullback on Northrop Grumman to maximize your entry point.
That brings us to the crucial slide 15, the key signal to watch budget account migration. The focus here is on the FY 2027 defense budget, which comes out in early 2026.
This is the trigger event.
So, what does this all mean? How do you actually track this development without getting completely lost in endless government paperwork?
It's actually simpler than you'd think. You just have to watch two specific acronyms. RDT&E, which stands for Research, Development, Test, and Evaluation. That's the experimental money.
Okay, RDT&E is experimental.
Right. And then procurement, which is mass production money. The exact moment you see a directed energy program move from an RDT&E account into a procurement account in the federal budget, that is the definitive sector-wide buy signal.
Because they're finally writing the big checks?
Exactly. It proves the military has officially stopped testing and started buying at scale.
All right, let's bring it all together with slide 16, Portfolio Construction Action Items. This summarizes the specific allocation blueprint. Can you give us the final cheat sheet on how to actually build this out? It looks a bit like the barbell strategy you see in finance.
It's very much a barbell strategy.
So how do we weight it?
You anchor the heavy, safe end of your portfolio with RTX as your core, low-risk holding, mostly because of their dominance in microwave swarm defense. In the middle, Northrop Grumman is your medium-risk value play due to their fantastic PE ratio.
And the risky end?
On the far risky end of the barbell, N-Light is your speculative kicker, but again, keep it under 2% of your total allocation. And finally, avoid those unproven pure-play startups entirely.
Got it. Of course, we do have to look at slide 17, risk factors, what could go wrong. Because nothing is a sure thing. The deck lists budget sequestration, technical maturation, and adversary countermeasures.
Always have to account for the risks.
Yeah, let me latch onto that last one, actually. Adversary